Victimhood has become almost a mental plague upon Black America in particular, because that word racism is being so overused that society is becoming desensitized to it, and we actually can't even recognize it when it actually exists. We think everything is racist.
You say nothing about slavery. Nothing. So the equivocal number from the 1860s for 40 acres today is $200 million.
The first time I was called an Oreo was in middle school. She said, "Oh, you're such an Oreo. Like, you act white, you listen to white people music." It seems like if you act too Black, then you won't fit in with the white kids or the other kids that aren't Black. And if you aren't Black enough, then the Black kids don't see you as Black. They don't accept you as who you are.
Can we stop, normalizing people being late? It's not cute, it's not funny, it's not a...
When y'all are ready to learn about the connections between this, and the white American cultural norm with obsessing over being on time, please let me know.
Being late is not rooted in white supremacy. It'll never be rooted in white supremacy. It's rooted in you being an egotistical human being who thinks everybody's supposed to wait on you when you're wasting everybody's time.
Well, today's topic is going to be a good one. Today we are discussing the state of affairs in the Black community. More specifically, our aversion to accountability, our constant gatekeeping of Blackness, and the mob mentality that seems to rear its ugly head every time someone holds a mirror to our face. So I tend to get into heated debates with family members, friends, even perfect strangers when I talk about accountability in the Black community or the lack thereof. What I encounter often is a lot of entitlement and excuses, but not a whole lot of introspection. I want to start with the blame game that a lot of people tend to play. I don't have a lot of patience for complainers. I don't like people who are complaining and blaming people for the position that they're in. There are so many people in our community who do not believe in personal responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. If they're in a bad state, they never look in the mirror. They never get introspective and question what role they played in the position that they're currently in. I cannot tell you how many times I hear people saying that it was mommy's fault, or it was daddy's fault, or it was the environment's fault. And yes, those things do have some bearing in your life. They do, but you cannot reach the age of being in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s and beyond and still blaming somebody else for the predicament that you're in. There are millions of people around the world who grew up without a father in the home or a mother in the home or sometimes both parents in the home, but they seem to succeed despite the odds. Are many born in bad environments? Absolutely. Are many born to crappy parents? You better believe it. Do you have to sometimes work 2 and 3 jobs to survive and take care of your family? Yes, that happens. But guess what? That's not an experience that is unique to the Black community. There are many white people who will tell you about having to work multiple jobs to put themselves through college, or having to take care of their families while working or going to school. Talk to people in the Hispanic groups and they'll tell you the same. I know a guy from North Africa who's working 2 jobs, working around the clock just to put himself through school, and he has a family to take care of. That's what you do. We in the Black community are not unique in our struggles. Oh, let me tell you something. I can hear the critics now. Oh, but Hispanic people weren't slaves. White people weren't slaves. Were you? I've never picked cotton. I've never worked in a field. I've never been sold on a slave auction. I've never been beaten, not even by my parents. We do not have the same experience that many of our ancestors had, and thank God for that. So why am I still using slavery as a crutch, blaming slavery for my lack of progress? It's a sentiment that I hear often from my Black brothers and sisters, and I think many of them forget that we are the result of our choices. And speaking of our choices, I want to talk about our relationship with money. Your not having money can stem from many reasons. I often hear Black people saying that we need reparations. If they gave us reparations, it would set us on the right path. That's not going to solve our problems. Perhaps temporarily. But in the words of Patrice Washington, who you are with $100 is who you'll be with $1 million. So if you're not good at managing $100, you're not going to be good at managing $1 million. You'll have $1 million, but you just have more money to mismanage. I often hear many people in my community saying, well, I didn't come from money. I didn't have the right parents. I didn't have the right last name. Okay, could have fooled me. If you look at our spending habits, it seems that we prefer to appear being rich than actually being rich. I remember I used to work with a woman who used to clown me all the time for having cheap purses. So I still shop at like TJ Maxx and Marshalls and Ross and all those other stores, right? Because to me, a purse is just something to carry around my goods. I didn't want to put too much money into buying these things that had no value at the end of the day. And guess what? I didn't care. I had money though. And that same woman who used to clown me all the time would ask me, hey, you got a couple dollars? I need some money for my gas. What? Priorities. You know what the problem is? We're too focused on looking good. We want to look good for people. We want to look good for each other on Instagram and online. We want to look good for them. But you know what looks good? A fat bank account. Let me quickly add that I am not rich, but let me tell you something what I do know. Tough times are always lurking around the corner, so I act accordingly. Another thing that I often hear in the Black community is, I don't know how to save money. My parents never taught me how to save money. We don't have financial literacy in the community. Okay, the problem is a lot of your parents never knew how to save money. But you know how you save money? It's very simple, by the way. Don't spend it. I had a former Bahamian boss, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you've heard me mention him from time to time, because this line right here was just it for me. We would often get into conversations about life, about finances, and I remember one time he was like, Rogan, one thing I've learned? You can't have things and money in the bank. And I've said this a million times on my channel. You can't have things and money in the bank. You got to choose one. You want things, you can't have money in the bank. You want a fat bank account, then you can't have things. You have to make your choice. And a lot of times we choose to have things because it gives us the outward appearance of wealth. And guess what? We ain't got nothing in the bank. Let's talk about the way that we go about condoning bad behavior inside of the Black community. I feel like we have a history of remaining silent when it comes to bad behavior in our community. Many of us destroy our own communities with violence, but you know what we say? No snitching. People brag about not being a snitch. Remember when those folks in Chicago started wilding out? I was so shocked that we didn't hear the same community activists and leaders and politicians speaking up with the same fervor that they would have if a white cop had an interaction with our community. I've found that our politicians and our community leaders lack the courage to boldly criticize our group when we do wrong. Whenever they're pressed to speak up, all they say is systemic this, racism that. All they do is panda. Panda. Panda, 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 panda. And okay, those things have a place, but when someone is lashing out, someone shoots the other person, where is the condemnation for that? Remember all that outrage about Walmart's closing in Chicago? I was one of those people who was like, why are you shocked? Why are we shocked that Walmart pulled out? You rob the place, you attack its workers, and you think the company is going to remain in your community? Out of love? I felt sorry for the Chicago residents who don't condone that mess, who are not a part of that mess, but somehow got caught up in it. I feel so sorry for them. I remember watching a TikTok video of a woman who was going through the Walmart showing the empty shelves, and she was just crying. And I don't know if everybody listened to what she said. She said, Black people did this to us. Black people did this to us. She was crying. She said, people out there trying to find food to feed their babies, and this happened. I was so hurt to hear her crying. because I understood where she was coming from. But where was that same outrage from the other activists? And the crazy thing is, there were people online condemning Walmart for pulling out. Oh, Walmart deserved this because what? Walmart is here to run a business, okay? And when the community no longer serves that business, they will leave. Bye-bye. And then I think about the mayhem back in Chicago in April. You have people like Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson pandering to these folks and saying, while it's unacceptable, it's not constructive to demonize young people who have been starved of opportunities. Really? You have a problem with the fact that people are demonizing vandals? 3 teens were shot during that melee, by the way. But you have a problem with people criticizing them. You see, people like Johnson are the reason why I really don't care for politics or politicians. These individuals get into positions and they become so concerned with voters and being reelected that they don't speak truth to power. I remember back in 2008 when Reverend Jesse Jackson was caught on a hot mic criticizing Barack Obama, for talking down to the Black community. Jackson was mad because Obama was asking Black people to take more responsibility for the state that they're in.
Talking down to Black people on those faith-based.
Did you see the little cutting action? Well, you couldn't see it because he did it down below. But see, that is a sentiment that has us in the predicament that we're in right now. Next, I want to talk about gatekeeping blackness. I don't know who appointed some of these folks, the arbiters of blackness. What is black? What is not black? But it needs to stop right now. You're not black enough is something that is constantly thrown around when a Black person exhibits behaviors that they think deviates from the norms of what blackness is.
I'm not accepting no prep school, Bel Air bred sellout into my fraternity. Being Black isn't what I'm trying to be, it's what I am.
What I've come to realize is that sometimes our differences aren't related to race at all, right? It's related to class and exposure. If you grow up in a wealthy neighborhood or a middle class neighborhood, or you grow up in a neighborhood that has a very small minority population, your experiences are going to be completely different from someone who grew up in an inner city community. This is why so many Black kids are into punk rock or alternative music or country music, or they golf, or they're into anime, or, it's because that's what they're exposed to. That doesn't make them any less Black because they choose to listen to Dolly Parton versus Glorilla. And there are so many Black people who get called Oreo constantly because they go against the grain.
When I was in middle school and high school, I felt like that was definitely my experience. The first time I was called an Oreo was in middle school. This girl, Jada, came up to me. We were having a little conversation, and then for some reason it came up that, she thought that I was an Oreo. And I think it's because I was talking about the music that I listened to, and I was really into punk music at the time. And so she said, "Oh, you're such an Oreo. Like, you act white, you listen to white people music," which we'll get into later, but I knew what it meant, so I wasn't like dumbfounded when she said it, but I was still really confused. It's a really strange experience being a Black kid in the suburbs, because it seems like if you act too Black, then you won't fit in with the white kids or the other kids that aren't Black. And if you aren't Black enough, then the Black kids don't see you as Black. They don't accept you as who you are.
As I've said before, it really just boils down to what you're exposed to. I remember when my brother lived in London, and then he came back home to Nassau. And he was like, "Oh, I have so many different types of music I want you to listen to." And I was like, "Okay." And he starts pulling out these CDs of Seal, The Beautiful South, Hot Chocolate, I Believe in Miracles, and the Pet Shop Boys. And I just looked at this collection, and I looked at my brother, and I was like, "Bruv." I was like, "Where you going with these white people music?" I was young, and that was my thought process. Like, I didn't know any of this stuff, and this stuff was just weird to me, right? When my brother passed away, I went into his room and I saw all of these CDs there. And I remember picking up the Pet Shop Boys discography album and putting it on and just listening it from top to bottom. And I was just like, damn, this is some good music. I remember listening to The Beautiful South, and I was like, why was I so close-minded to it? Why was I not listening to this stuff? And I realized that my brother was, he was exposed, and he had a great ear. I love you from the bottom of my pencil case. So it just boils down to what you're exposed to. What's funny to me too is like, when many people in the Black community will call someone an Oreo because of the type of music they listen to or what they're exposed to, it's just mind-blowing, because the same people who would do that are the same ones who are like totally in love with Tupac Shakur, who is one of the most brilliant minds in rap and an amazing lyricist, right? But they don't know Tupac's history. They just know the thug version of Tupac. Tupac Shakur was an artsy kid, right? He was an art kid. He did ballet. I think he even performed in like the Nutcracker. He wrote poetry. He read books constantly. Of course, he wrote his songs. He was into drama, acting. He was very talented. He loved Shakespeare. He's been documented as saying he loved Shakespeare, right? This is an art kid. And I think the reason why he was one of the greatest lyricists that walked this earth is because he was exposed to so many different things. It taught him different things, right? I think all of these things contributed to his artistry, and it really showed that he had substance. I find that a lot of Black folks are reluctant to step outside of their comfort zone, step outside of their communities and see what else is out there. I have Black friends, and I can't tell you how many times I've had to sort of drag them into different spaces they would not ordinarily want to enter. Because they just have this perception that they won't be welcome. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have a lot of people who will step outside of their communities. They won't step outside of their comfort zones to see how the other side lives. They just won't do it. And I think that is limiting them as far as their exposure, as far as their experiences. So because they feel uncomfortable when they see other Black people stepping out of their comfort zones and moving into maybe predominantly white spaces, it's odd to them. I want to talk about the R word. And if you hear me kind of abbreviating certain things, it's just because YouTube is so ridiculous. Sometimes they'll just flag your content or, limit your ads on your pieces. So that's why I'm just being careful with the words that I'm using. It's just so stupid. But anyway, I feel that we're just too casual with this word. We are just too casual with this word. Every white person is not racist. And if you watched my video last week, you'll know that white people ain't the only ones who are racist. I did a video a few weeks back where I was talking about the LGBTQIA plus community and a lot of the activists' constant overuse of the word transphobic and homophobic every time someone has an issue with what they're doing or there's some dissent. And I talked about how those words are losing their value. They're losing their power because it's been overused, because these people have overplayed their hands. And I find that same thing is happening in the Black community, where every time we have a disagreement or someone has a disagreement with us, we are so quick to say that they are racist and that's the reason why they, don't like us. I do admit that there are microaggressions that a lot of Black people are very sensitive to, and rightly so, based on what they experience. So I would never discount that. But every interaction that is negative between a Black person and a white person does not equate to racism. Sometimes people don't want you in their space because you're rude. There are some people Black people who I don't even want in my space. You try to speak to them very civilly and it's a problem, right? They're getting loud, they're getting rambunctious. I don't want to be in that space. Me as a Black person, I don't want to be in that space. I don't want to be in their space. I don't want them in my space. So that's what happens. A lot of times people just don't want to be around you because you're a pretty rotten person. And the crazy thing is, white people aren't the only ones who get it. Like if a Black person were to intervene and say something, speak out to certain Black folks, they get called with the C word that rhymes with moon, right? And that happens quite often as well. Every time there's a Black person who speaks out against the Black community and says what we're doing wrong, they immediately labeled the C word, which is so completely unfair. And that again is contributing to why we're in this position. And a lot of people don't want to be called that word. So they just keep silent. They remain silent, not ever saying anything. They harbor their personal viewpoints. They talk about it with their families and friends. Oh, I don't want to be around that group, but they will never say it outwardly. But I think when you really love someone and you love a group and you love your community, like I love my community, you are supposed to tell them the truth. Imagine having a friend or a family member that is on the wrong path, doing wrong, just kind of spiraling out of control. You see some things happening in their lives and you say, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to be criticized. No, that's not love. If you love them, you will say, hey, we have some things that we need to work out. We have some things that we need to fix. And if you don't say anything, that shows that you don't love them. But some people don't look at it that way. They look at it as you're criticizing me. You think you're better than me because they have their own insecurities. No, that's not what it is. People see the path you're going down, and we are a collective, right? And especially in the Black community, we know that there are people who will say one Black person and one Black experience represents everybody else. It's not fair. I don't subscribe to it, but it happens. What they encounter with one person over here is what they feel about the collective. I feel that we have grown too hostile and too entitled, and we're too quick to dismiss someone's opinions of us just because they are not Black. I think that is a silly move to make. There's always value in hearing other positions from different people who are outside of our community. It's no different, and I'm going to use this as an example again. I'm somebody who is heterosexual. I'm not homosexual, but I had a video where I was critical of some of the things that are going on inside the LGBTQIA plus community. And I was overwhelmed with the love and support that I got from so many people who said, I feel the same way. I'm glad someone spoke out about it. And it's not to be critical or destructive towards that group. I care about that group. I have family and friends who are members of that group. And even if I didn't, I still care about them. They're still people, right? But you still have to be able to call a spade without people just being quick to jump down your throat. I want us to be better as a Black community. I don't want us to continue using certain historical events as a crutch. And I know there are going to be people who take exception to me saying that, and they're going to give me the whole rundown of why they do it and why it's still commonplace for people to do it and the systemic oppression and all that stuff. Go on with it. That's fine. But I'm not going to do it because you know why? If we continue along this path and we teach our children the same thing, we'll find ourselves, well, I won't be here, I'll be long gone. But 400 years down the line, we'll be looking back and still saying, 800 years ago, my ancestors were slaves. It will not get better. We have to start really showing that we love and care about one another by holding each other accountable. I want everyone to weigh in on this conversation. Even though this was my letter to the Black community, I want everyone to weigh in. White people, brown people, Asian people, it doesn't matter who you are, you're all my people. So please feel free to weigh in. And I think there's something to glean from people's experiences with our community that we may be missing. So don't be quick to dismiss people, discount them, or just brand them as racist. Just truly listen to what people have to say. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.